Come with me underground, where 11 miners' meals reveal survival, sacrifice, and consequences still felt today.
19th century coal miners deliberately shared part of their own lunch with rats living inside the mine, not out of kindness, but because those rats warned of dangerous gas and cave-ins before any human could sense it. Here are 11 real meals that fed men working hundreds of feet below the surface, and what each one still says about us today.
Before we go on, subscribe now. Item 10 on this list is directly linked to a disease still killing miners in the United States today, decades after any safety flag was supposedly resolved.
Cornish pasty miners in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, many of them immigrants from Cornwall, England, worked hundreds of feet underground with no real chance to surface for a hot meal during an entire shift. The solution was the pasty, a sealed hand pie filled with meat, potato, onion, and rutabaga, folded into a half moon with a thick, crimped edge that worked as a handle, so coal-blackened hands never touched the actual filling. Miners warmed their pasty by hanging their lunch pail over a candle wedged into the tunnel wall and deliberately discarded the crimped edge, considered too contaminated to safely eat. This food crossed generations, and today, Michigan still holds entire festivals dedicated to the pasty, nearly 2 centuries after the region's last copper mine closed. It's proof that a solution born from pure underground necessity can become a source of regional pride long after the original danger disappeared. Company store credit dinner in entire mining towns built and controlled by a single coal company. A miner received part of his pay as credit scrip that could only be spent at the company's own store, usually at higher prices than any independent market. The family bought its entire dinner on credit, financially tied to the same employer who set both the price of food and the value of wages at once. That dependency became so etched into American collective memory that it turned into the lyrics of one of the country's most recognized songs, 16 Tons, with its line, "I owe my soul to the company store," still sung and recognized nearly a century later. The song turned a specific economic practice of mining towns into a universal metaphor for debt and worker exploitation, still used today far outside any mining context. It's one of the rare cases on this list where the pain of a meal became literally permanent popular culture. Cold tea in a sealed tin, bringing a hot drink underground carried a real risk not worth taking. Extreme heat in some deep galleries, combined with heavy physical labor, already caused heat exhaustion, and any open flame near pockets of methane gas could trigger a fatal explosion. The solution was carrying already cold tea inside a tightly sealed metal tin, keeping the liquid safe and drinkable for hours with no dangerous heat source needed inside the tunnel. The practice spread across mining regions in the United Kingdom and the United States, documented in accounts from miners of different generations who described the tea tin as being just as essential as their lamp or pickaxe. Today, modern mine safety protocols still tightly regulate what can and can't be carried and consumed underground, a direct line from that 19th century cold tea tin to the safety standards that exist now. Food shared with the mine rats. Rats infested nearly every coal mine, stealing food from miners' pails whenever they got the chance, which should have earned them only anger and traps. Instead, miners in Montana, Colorado, and several other regions developed the habit of deliberately crumbling and leaving the pasty's crimped edge, or part of any other food, specifically for the rats. The reason was practical, not sentimental. Rats sensed dangerous gas or an imminent cave-in before any human could, and fled the area in a scramble shortly before disaster struck. A miner who saw the rats running often knew he had seconds to get out too. Historians document this behavior in mining records from Utah, Colorado, and the United Kingdom, and it anticipated, decades early, the exact same logic behind the official use of canaries inside British coal mines, kept in use until the 1980s. Feeding the very creature stealing your lunch was, in practice, feeding the most reliable warning system down there.
You've seen 4 of these 11 meals so far, but hold on to this. Item 8 is the only food on this entire list you can still buy exactly the same today, off the shelf of any corner store. And item 10 connects a simple meal to a disease that still exists right now.
Bread and dripping. Before a 10 or 12-hour shift, many mining families had neither the money nor the time to prepare an elaborate breakfast. The solution was simple: rendered meat fat saved from previous meals, spread over a slice of still warm bread, delivering calories dense enough to fuel hours of heavy physical labor underground. The practice, common in both British mining regions and immigrant communities in the United States, required zero preparation beyond warming the fat already saved, making it ideal for the rushed early mornings before a shift began. Decades later, even with no real need to stretch a budget the same way, bread and dripping is still remembered with genuine nostalgia in British working-class communities, still appearing on pub menus today as a historic comfort dish. A food born from pure scarcity became, over time, an affectionate symbol of working-class identity. Buckwheat cakes with sorghum syrup. In the Appalachian Mountains, where ordinary wheat struggled in the region's rocky, acidic soil, mining families grew buckwheat instead, hardier against the local climate, and made dark, dense pancakes topped with locally produced sorghum syrup. The dish solved two problems at once. It made use of a grain the local land could actually produce, and it delivered enough caloric carbohydrate to fuel an entire mining shift before any other meal was available. Unlike ordinary wheat, which had to be bought in from outside the region at higher prices, locally grown buckwheat kept the family less dependent on the company store mentioned earlier on this list. The combination of buckwheat pancakes with sorghum syrup is still served at Appalachian restaurants and regional fairs today, one of the few dishes on this list that never depended on any mining company to exist.
Before we continue, take a guess. Which food on this list do you think is still sold today, with no change to the recipe, almost 100 years later? It's not the obvious one, and the answer comes in two items.
Ramps. Wild leeks. At the end of a whole winter with no fresh vegetables, Appalachian mining families faced real vitamin deficiency with no money and no easy access to fresh produce shipped in from outside the mountain region. The solution arrived on its own, sprouting naturally on the hillsides the moment snow began to melt. The ramp, a strong-smelling wild leek somewhere between garlic and onion in flavor, was the season's first edible plant, gathered for free straight off the mountain. Eating ramps after months of preserved food was at once real nutrition and the first concrete proof that winter had finally ended. The town of Richwood, West Virginia, has held its Feast of the Ramson since 1938, a festival that still happens every year today, nearly 90 years later, drawing visitors from outside the region just to taste the same plant that once saved entire families from seasonal malnutrition. Moon pie and RC cola. During a break too short for any real meal, a miner needed something that fit in one hand while the other kept holding a tool or lamp. The food industry answered in 1917 with the moon pie, two large marshmallow-filled cookies coated in chocolate, specifically designed to be as big as the moon and calorie-dense enough to carry a manual laborer through to the end of a shift. Paired with a cold RC cola, also cheap and high in calories, the combination became practically synonymous with a manual worker's break across the American South, miners included. Nearly a century later, the moon pie is still sold on the same gas station and corner store shelves across the region, still marketed with the same original promise of fast, cheap energy, an unbroken line straight from the 1920s miner to anyone buying the same snack today.
You've seen 4 of these 11 meals so far, but hold on to this. Item 8 is the only food on this entire list you can still buy exactly the same today, off the shelf of any corner store. And item 10 connects a simple meal to a disease that still exists right now.
Groundhog stew, small game available for free in the forests around Appalachian mining towns, solved a recurring problem. Fresh meat cost money that most mining families simply didn't have left after company house rent and the store bill. Groundhog, abundant and relatively easy to hunt without expensive equipment, became a thick stew cooked with whatever vegetables the backyard garden had on hand, offering real protein in a diet dominated by cheap carbohydrate. The subsistence hunting practiced around mining towns continued long after the Depression had passed, and hunters in Appalachia still keep the tradition alive today, less out of extreme necessity now, and more from a direct cultural connection to grandparents and great-grandparents who depended on that same hunt to survive. The ritual of washing hands before eating. Eating with your own hands covered in coal dust with no sink or water available at the bottom of a tunnel meant swallowing a real amount of that dust with every bite, across thousands of shifts over an entire working lifetime. The solution that more responsible mining companies and unions eventually demanded, after decades of resistance, was the creation of designated eating areas set farther back from the digging face, along with strict rules to wash hands and face before any meal, even if that meant losing precious minutes of a short break. That swallow dust, combined with dust inhaled over years of work, is directly linked to pneumoconiosis, commonly known as black lung disease, a condition still killing American miners today, with a documented resurgence in recent decades caused by thinner coal seams that force cutting through more rock and generating more silica dust. The simplest meal on this entire list carries, to this day, the most serious health consequence of them all: barley sugar, quick energy in a pocket. In the middle of a long shift with no time or space to stop for a full meal, a miner needed an instant energy source that would fit in a coverall pocket without melting or spoiling in the tunnel's heat and humidity. Barley sugar, a hard, translucent candy made only from boiled sugar, solved exactly that problem. It needed no refrigeration, never spoiled, and delivered a fast energy spike in seconds with no real work stoppage required. The candy of British origin traveled with immigrant mining families to the United States and is still sold today in traditional candy shops, almost always marketed with some nostalgic nod to simpler times, even though its real origin was tied to the practical need to survive a shift underground. It's the perfect closing note for this entire list. From the pasty to the barley sugar, every solution was born from a specific pain of the underground, and everyone left a trace that still exists on the surface, decades or centuries later.
These 11 meals show that every solution created underground left a trace that still exists on the surface. A song, a festival, a candy still sold at any corner store, or a disease still killing people today. Miners' food was never just about surviving the shift. It was about what that shift would leave behind, decades after any mine had closed. Which of these 11 meals still exists in some form in your own life, even without you knowing it came from the bottom of a coal mine? Subscribe now, because the next video reveals another forgotten group from American history. Comment below which item shocked you more, the habit or the consequence?